up and down, and that's it. And you know, when you get these international trade agreements, they're hundreds, if not thousands, of pages long, and I don't even have the confidence in our United States Congress and Senate that there's anyone there that actually has the ability to look over these international trade agreements and actually have the ability to say whether it's good for the United States of America or any country. And I mean, I've been dealing with this. I was fortunate enough to actually be a co-sponsor of the bill, got the bill on. I've been on the commission basically every year except for probably one. And this scares the hell out of me, because when you take a look at it, with whatever trade agreement you have, if you have a trade agreement with some 3 countries over there and 3 countries over here, and they got this and this one, and they got this and that one, we like what we have here, we don't like what we have here. Eventually, it's like a spider web, and everything gets woven into everything sooner or later, till it's game over, and corporations have more say than the Supreme Court of the United States of America and the lawmakers and stuff. And
well said.
That's how you really feel.
Had planned to testify this evening, but my name is Cynthia Finney, and I used to say I lived in East Livermore, but our post office is closing and Google Maps has deleted us. So I live in Livermore Falls. Not anymore.
Formerly.
Yeah, formerly from New Sharon. I'm also the president of the Maine Fair Trade Campaign and a former member of the, a former representative of the Citizens Trade Policy Commission. I'm speaking mostly off the top of my head, and also mostly as myself, a citizen and taxpayer in the state of Maine. But I want to thank the Commission for doing this, the focus on agriculture, because it's I think it's a really important issue for Maine. Maine is in a position of having a lot of small and family farms still, which many places don't, that play an important role in our economy. And at least some people who actually study these things and look at them. There was I think it was the Brookings Institution and a couple other organizations did a study a few years back that if we chose to be, because of our geographic position and the amount of land that we still have in agriculture and our geographic location in proximity to certain large and metropolitan areas, we could actually rebuild agriculture to be a significant part of our economy if we chose that as a policy path as a state. And having learned what I've had the opportunity to learn by virtue of having served on the commission primarily, and understanding the ins and outs of some of the provisions in these the trade agreements and how they work and what they're designed to do, I think in terms of agriculture, it's really important for us to preserve the ability to, as a state or even as municipalities, make policies to support that if we choose to. I'm not in favor of something that ties the hands of a town that decides, for example, that at their schools they want some of their tax dollars to be supporting local food for the school lunches for the children. If the people of a town decide that they want to support the agriculture that way and feed their children that way, I do not want to have an international trade agreement that's been signed and negotiated and whipped through Congress without the ability to debate, to tie their hands to do that. I think those are important policy decisions that we get to hammer out together, and I want us to have the opportunity to do that and to decide yes or no, not to be told no, just as one example. And so, so thank you for looking at this topic, and thank you to the Agriculture Committee for stepping in to listen tonight. Oh, I also wanted to say, I have a very good friend of ours who is a 6th-generation dairy farmer, large dairy farm in the state of Maine. And I invited him to come tonight, but he's not here, kind of feels this is a little over his head. But part of why his farm makes it is because of the milk price supports. And I listened to John Piatti's testimony that he gave to the commission in December about ways that what happens on the international market impact our local prices for milk that who even knew. It was revealing to me when he talked about how organic farmers, many of whom are kind of outside of the the normal bureaucracy for the price setting, but how even that would get affected by changes that could happen in the powdered milk price on the global market. So I know that his farm makes it because of some of the price supports and things like that. And I know that it runs on a thin margin, as I imagine most farms do. And so to sort of turn over our ability to support our farmers that way in the interest of just leaving the market open so that the biggest and strongest can prevail, I don't think is in the interest of our state, because that's not who's in our state. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fanning, for your testimony. Any questions? Seeing none, I really appreciate it. And good to see you here tonight.
Thanks.
Dr. Case, I think you had a question earlier or comment?
With regard to the Trans-Pacific negotiations, I'm wondering if you're aware of any recent developments that might have come about, or even to share your perspective, either to the Attorney General or to Representative Treat, with regard to the President's most recent trip to Asia and the impact that might have had on these negotiations as we move forward.
It's a secret. Did you invite me on
It
the
is,
trip?
it is, all behind closed doors, but I do, one thing about working in this area, and this goes to your question about talking about balkanization, and if you are working on the trade issue, you do end up actually connecting up with people all over the world. And so at least by email, I'm connected to people all over the world. So just today, I opened up an email from someone in Chile who had an opportunity to ask that very question, what came out of this meeting in Beijing? And so I just read that. And, I don't know how accurate it is, but it was asking a number of the issues that we have had concerns about, one of which is the pricing of medicines and whether or not anything was done with that. But these were, I think, trade officials in Chile who had a public meeting to talk about what happened, which we don't do a whole lot of that in the US, but sometimes you learn more from other countries. And so the first thing that they said was, no, nothing really happened. It was a political meeting. It wasn't really a meeting where anything happened. And then there were a lot of questions about different things that we have raised questions about. One of them was medicines. That's still unresolved. Also, another big issue is the tobacco issue. And the statement on that was that's also unresolved. Well, the reason it's unresolved is that it's controversial, and people in Maine and people in this room have actually been raising their voices about it. So that's an indication that, we still could win on those issues and keep some of that stuff out of the agreement. So that's the word I heard today. Not that much really happened, but I will say that, I've had some more, for the cleared advisor meetings where they bring you in and tell you stuff. And I will say that it seems that many more of the chapters are resolved than were, say, a year ago. So it does feel like it is closing in more, which is concerning because there are provisions that are very worrisome. But those are two that remain, I think, unresolved.
Just to pursue Donna's comment question before, if there were some way, I don't need to get there. If there was some way, since you want our opinions, if there was some way for us to have lists or something, access to know what the issues are.
Yes.
I mean, we have some general idea. You mentioned a bunch of things tonight, and I'm aware that there's lots of other things like that, that we want to give you our opinion, you want to hear our opinion, but we're not sure if that's, is that something they're discussing now?
Yes, so here's what you can do. Our staff, Bob Kiermaier, came up to me and said, be sure everybody knows that all of this is on the website. Okay, so this report, which is really not that long, and there's an executive summary. It has all the key points in it, and 2 pages. That is posted on our website. We have also posted, and what you need to do is go onto the legislative, it's kind of hard to find it, but if you just put in Google
Yeah.
CTPC, Google that, it will take you
And
to.
that changes over time, right? I mean, other issues will be,
Yeah, there'll be other issues, but there, if you go to that website, you can get this report. We wrote some letters. One of the things that the report did is it said, here's some recommendations to the commission and to the agriculture committee that you might want to do. You might want to write some letters to various people asking questions. So we did that. We haven't gotten any answers yet, but we wrote those letters, and so you can read those letters and see. The other thing is you can get on our mailing list, okay? So you just write to, well, you can do that either on, can you click through on the website, Laura?
Yeah, there's a link on the CTPC website, and it's if you just Google Citizen Trade Policy Commission, you'll find our website, okay? And we have what we call an interested parties mailing list. And if you want to be on that mailing list, you will hear about everything that the commission is involved in. All of our scheduled meetings, our agendas, summaries of what we've done, all the letters that the commission has decided to write, who the commission has met with, what speakers we've had. It wasn't mentioned, but leadership of the commission met specifically with Senator Angus King and his staff regarding these free trade agreements. And I think it's fair to say that it was an interesting meeting, and I believe that Senator King really listened to what leadership of the commission had to say about these treaties and how it might affect the state of Maine. So.
And you know, although this is an opportunity for public comment verbally, if you wanted to email comments based on any of that, we would make sure, we meet once a month generally, we would make sure that got distributed to all of the members. Because that, you know, that is our charge. It's an educational one to the public, it's receiving information from the public, it's advising the U.S. government, it's advising our members of Congress, it's advising the legislature and the governor. So, you know, we're responsible for all of that, and, you know, it's very helpful to have your comments or people you know sending information to us.
Yes, sir.
another last thing I'd like to understand is, this push for the fast track thing, what is driving that? I mean, are they saying this thing's gonna be a done deal and snooze you lose, or can we not reject it now? And I mean, it's like European Union started out as a core of, you know, now Turkey's and whatever, Poland trying to join. Why, how can they push this? What's the basis for it, that we have to do it so fast?
Isn't it,
Anyone know?
isn't it based on the BRAC model of closing military bases? They know that if they open it up to debate, that it would be totally factionalized and nobody would really pass anything, because it would be so many different factions wanting a piece of the action. Not my base, not my backyard, not here, you know, not there. So they set up a BRAC commission with base, review, whatever it was. And that's how we ended up with an up or down vote on closing of military bases. I think it's sort of that model.
But from our point of view here, it would seem like we could reject it now, and
Right, and because I think the trade representative through time, through the last 10 years, 12 years, understands that if the United States does that, then every other country involved in it, they'll want to pick it apart. Some part of that country will want another deal that isn't in it wasn't in the works before, so the whole thing falls apart. I mean, there are some good things about trade agreements. We, you know, we do want to be fair in our dealings with other countries, and we want to be able to export products from this country to other countries without tariffs, the burden of tariffs. But I think the key thing, and it is a complicated thing to understand, is this investor-state arbitration process, because that's the enforcement mechanism. And not all countries want it, but we hear that our trade representative is pushing for it. And that enforcement mechanism gives the 16,000 corporations that are now doing business in Pacific Rim countries, from Australia to China, and all those Pacific Rim countries, it gives them authority to go to court and dismantle our regulations as they affect their competitive edge in this country. and bring our local corporations and businesses down to the level of enforcement that's in the other countries. And without even going to court and making the state of Maine, for instance, or some other state, pay damages for allowing our local businesses to succeed to the detriment of the competitive advantage that those companies would like to have. Do you understand what I'm saying? I mean, it's not an easy thing to say, but that's what's happening. And they've brought actions under NAFTA that were very, very disappointing. There was a patent infringement case in Canada recently where a company declared that the court had already ruled that the company, it was a pharmaceutical company, could not infringe on a patent that existed in Canada. And an arbitration under this investor state arbitration provision succeeded in ignoring the court ruling in Canada and saying, no, this company that wants to do business in Canada has a right to a level playing field, and you can't regulate it any more than it's regulated in its own country, basically. It's weird, and it's dangerous. So,
Isn't the remedy, and this is why they call investment partnerships, it's almost, you look at it as a lost profits.
yes.
And isn't the remedy that the United States has to pay if they lose, they have to pay the lost profits of the
Yes.
investment? And so, for example, if you have some protections for the dairy industry, agricultural industry in Maine, for local acquisitions for schools and other places, and a foreign entity could come in and say, well, I could sell that milk to a school at substantially less, or not, maybe a little bit less, but I'm not allowed to bid because I'm not a local vendor. So they go to arbitration, and they win, because those are the facts. So the Maine agricultural industry still provides what they do at kind of a subsidized basis, or at an increased cost to the schools or the hospitals. And the remedy is, if they go to these tribunals, the remedy is that they have to pay, the United States has to pay for those lost profits. In other words, for the foreign entity's investment. In other words, they didn't get the bid. Well, we don't know, and this is one of the things that's come up, we don't know if the federal government has to pay this, are they going to turn to the state and say, okay, you reimburse the federal government? And we, as far as I know, we've never got any indication from the federal government as to whether or not they're going to try to pass this on down to the state. That's one issue. The second issue is the lack of transparency. And the excuse, I'm sorry, the explanation, I interpret it to be an excuse for the lack of transparency is these trade associations, there are many trade associations, because as the Attorney General said, there's thousands of companies, but you don't want to listen to 1,000 companies flapping their gums. You'd rather listen to the trade associations rather than listening to something 1,000 times over. Listen to the trade association. In essence, they're going to represent the members of their trade association. The reason I got when I first started on the commission for lack of transparency is because they're giving, how should I say it, confidential information, confidential financial information to the trade negotiators, and they don't want that out there. Well, I think that may be maybe 1% of it, because you think most of these entities, particularly in the United States, are public entities, and if you've ever looked at an annual report, the 10K of the Securities and Exchange Commission, if you look at some of the reports of the state agencies, it's very detailed information. If you've got some, and I'm a CPA, and I used to do this stuff. I used to do 10Ks. And the detailed information that's available, if you've got the guts and the time to go through it, it's quite detailed and very enlightening. So here you have, they say, well, we can't be transparent. And yet if they need something, they're very transparent. pretty transparent when they go to get a trademark. So anyway, so this is where I sit as a businessman. And the other thing I'd like to have Sharon, when we talk about the Maine Citizens Trade Policy Commission, it's really been a leader in this area. And was it 3 years ago, 4 years ago, the commission got the attention of the Japanese. And I don't know if you remember in the news, but they hustled a reporter over from Japan to interview the chairs of the commission to see what's this upstart state doing, causing all this trouble. And it was about 3 years ago, we had members of Vermont, I think it was New Jersey and Connecticut, coming to see what Maine Citizens Trade Policy Commission was up to. So I think you've got to say that the chairs and the people that are members of the commission have been very active, particularly the chairs, because we kind of wander in and nod and give them our approval and raise our hands and vote. But they're really the leaders. And although this year we're kind of concentrating on agriculture, in prior years we've had a focus on other issues, because it's so comprehensive and it's so far-reaching. There's no way this commission could focus on everything under the sun that's going on down there. So when you talk about lack of transparency, sir, it's very hard for you to comprehend, since we're supposed to be a democracy. But there's no transparency. And this stuff is literally done behind closed doors. What, you're sworn to secrecy on the stuff you get hold of?
Yeah, I mean, no, really, I mean, it's just like you're gonna go to jail if you tell anyone, you know,
We're
this is.
gonna
you're
have to
not-
torture her to find out what she knows. Because to review the stuff she's seen as an advisor, she can't share it with you.
Well, the funny story is they actually, you know, I mentioned how normally we don't get to see the text that's from other countries. But the USDR did want to share some things that they pulled together on, it was on the environment. And that's a very controversial chapter. It's whether or not it's enforceable, because these investment rules are enforceable through this arbitration panel, but the labor and the environmental chapters in past agreements have not been enforceable. So they don't really mean anything, because it's like, please comply with your own laws. But if you don't have any, well, that's all right. And if you don't comply with them, then we'll have a conversation about it. I mean, that's basically what it is. So anyway, they had this like 25-page agreement, and they said, we're not going to post it on the secure website. You're going to have to come into the U.S. Trade Representative's office to read it. So I got really mad because obviously we're in the state of Maine. We do not have the budget to fly down to Washington to read documents when they are posted. So they finally, it took them 2 weeks, which actually was after the time period for us to comment on it. Nonetheless, I was determined to read this document. So they set it up so that I had to go to the FBI office in Augusta to read this document, which was a very interesting experience.
What did it say?
That's the problem. I mean, so what do I do with this information?
Now we have to shoot her.
Isn't it silly?
You know, it's very, you know, it's really, and I think as state legislators, okay, it's true, some of you served on appropriations, they have caucuses in the back room once in a while trying to, you know, kind of get to the last tiny bit of the budget. But 99% of what we do as legislators is in the public. You know, the bills are publicly printed, the amendments are public, the testimony's public, it's posted on the website. And we have to take votes in public so everyone knows how we voted. That can be tough. So we're used to that. And so when you have these negotiations where everything is secret and you don't know what's going on, you don't know what's in it until after it's done, that's the problem with fast track. I understand about, you know, you can't have everybody tearing something to pieces. But if you know, you have a speeded up process, then you at least need to know what you're voting on. And that is a real issue here, when you do have these agreements that are thousands of pages, you know, or at least many hundreds, and 29 different chapters in the Trans-Pacific Partnership on everything from, you know, whether it's financial services, you know, we've just been talking about some of the issues. Banks, insurance, I mean, these are all part of these agreements. So, yeah, it's, you know, but anyway, we're really glad you're here. To talk about
Just to be devil's advocate, one can also see why those businesses that are gathering behind closed doors would feel a need to, some of this information is very, very much affects, you know, can't have you know this about our corporation or our cartel or whatever operates. I'm not very sympathetic toward it, but I can understand it.
Right.
And the other thing is not being able to get a response from the U.S. Trade Representative. Even some of our senators and members of Congress have written letters. 48 attorneys general wrote a letter to the U.S. Trade Representative last January, February, on the tobacco issue especially. We never got a response, not even a thank you for your letter. You know who we did get a response from? This boggled my mind. It's the National Association of Manufacturers. And how did they get our letter? They responded by saying, oh, don't worry about the tobacco laws. Oh, that'll be taken care of. The National Association of Manufacturers. Thanks for responding on behalf of the U.S. Trade Representative. Anyway, but members of Congress have the same problem.
It's kind of like one time, I'm also a pilot, and I wrote a letter, there was an aviation issue that was very important to pilots, and the Pilots Association suggested you write the congressional delegation. So I wrote a letter, I won't say who they were, I wrote a letter to 2 members of our congressional delegation, 1 representative, 1 senator. And it wasn't one of these form letters, it was a letter which I wrote, which I thought was pretty cogent, pretty persuasive. And I got a form letter from one 3 weeks after the issue came for a vote, and the other one 4 weeks after the issue came for a vote, and it was a form letter. They said, thank you very much, Mr. Palmer, for your letter. We will take it into consideration when it comes for a vote.
Oh, no.
And it also said we're pleased to represent you, right?
Please vote.
It was not an election year.
I mean, it's almost the same way. If you go on our website, as Locke suggested, you'll see the correspondence with people, and you'll see the lack of response. What are they going to say? I mean, the letters to them, the letters that the commission votes on, are pretty particular as what, like, the information we like to get, and they don't want to give it to you, and so you don't get a response because they don't really want to communicate with you.
And what you and Janet are talking about, you're talking about lack of accountability within some state or whatever an agency. We're not talking about an international, you know, the Trans-Pacific thing. I mean,
Where else would you go? You asked where would you go? Well, you go to your congressional delegation.
Yeah.
You go to your trade representative. I mean, they're the ones supposedly working for us. I mean, I bet we're paying them their salary, don't you think so? But you don't get a response, a meaningful response anyway. But go read the letters, you'll see what we're talking about on the website.
They do get to vote though on this, so, you know, that's where the buck does stop, is in Congress. So, and we have a new member of Congress from the 2nd CD, probably isn't really up to speed on these issues. I mean, that's something that we as a commission maybe should be sitting down. We have sat down with all of our members of Congress with their staff to try to talk about the commission. I think that would be very important, those of you that live in the 2nd CD. That's a new opportunity to meet with people and let them know what the issues are. So, and, you know, there's...
Just a question, how are the European component reacting to this type of treaty? And is there a undercurrent involved in small agriculture and small-scale manufacturing in Europe.
Actually, there is, and that, I had the opportunity to actually meet with members of the European Parliament in July. And I presented this report, and I got to meet with people who were from, you know, how they have a parliamentary system, so it's not just Democrats, Republicans, and a couple of independents. It's a whole range of parties, from extreme conservatives to extreme liberals. I mean, beyond liberal, far more liberal than any of the Democrats here in the room, including activists, organic farmers who've been arrested, you know, at McDonald's years ago, I found out, and he was from France. And so that was fascinating, and they had really, you know, the same issues of interest. They're very interested in farm to table and farm to school. They were interested in the fact that the new U.S. Farm Bill actually includes provisions that help promote that, and they were interested in maybe seeing how to make that happen more in their countries. But they have concerns about anything in this agreement that could prevent that. They have very strict rules around GMOs already in the European Union and on many chemicals. A lot of focus on killing off the bees. And they had concerns around this agreement and whether that would, in fact, make it difficult to regulate those pesticides in ways that would protect pollinators. So there was a lot of interest in what we were doing in Maine, and I think it was eye-opening for them, because I think the image that many of them have of agriculture in the United States is giant soybean farms in the Midwest, or giant corn farms in the Midwest, or you know, really more industrial agriculture. And I think it was very interesting to them to find out that there might be common ground with legislators in the United States who share those interests.
They're very concerned too about the GMO laws. We don't have them. If we were to enter an agreement, a company like Monsanto could argue that anything in the European Union is violating their free market ability with their genetically modified seeds. So that's a big concern for them over there. Representative Saucer.
Are these trade agreements forever binding? I mean, assuming all these countries vote and they do get into this agreement, can you get out of it? I mean, is it forever binding? I mean, where does it go?
I think it's very hard to get out of them. I think you can, but all the parties need to agree, or you have to basically pay to get out, you know, if your country,
I mean, NAFTA
Decides
doesn't
not
have a
to.
term, right?
with that.
NAFTA does not have to be reenacted. It does not have a termination date.
I'm just going.
Yeah. But I mean, trade agreements can certainly be renegotiated. Historically, they are.
But one of the issues with both of these big agreements is that there's so many countries involved in them that changing something requires the agreement, you know, would require the agreement of all these different countries. And they're also set up, particularly the Trans-Pacific one, so that even after it's decided, additional countries can come into it. So, you know, if you just have an agreement, say, between Chile and the United States, you might agree to things that you wouldn't agree to if it involved the United States and Japan and China and all these other countries. You know, you might have a different view, and it might affect your economy in a really different way. And one of the problems with these proposed agreements is that after they're finished the negotiations, and after the U.S., let's say, joins in and Congress says, yes, we want to do it, other countries could join in later. And, you know, that might really change how you felt about it. The other thing is that both of these agreements set up like, or proposed to set up, again, we don't really know, but these are some controversial provisions, they set up these ongoing regulatory councils that will oversee laws and regulations that are being developed in the United States and in the European Union in particular, and wouldn't include like state legislators, but it might include industry. We don't really know, but the idea being that before you could pass a law, that this council that included people from the European Union and different agencies and mostly trade people would look at this law and say, well, we don't like it. You know, we think this violates this agreement, or it could, or, you know, we're telling you right now, don't do it. So it gets into a level of interfering with sovereignty and our, you know, really, I mean, I think this is why this is an issue it's not a liberal or conservative one. It really goes to what's in the Constitution and what is the role of, I mean, who does make the laws? Is it some international group of people who are unelected that are making those decisions, or is it elected, you know, representatives, whether it's here or in Europe? And so I think that's a huge issue right now in the Transatlantic Agreement, is this idea of some kind of an ongoing regulatory council.
Just one other thing, are these two agreements going to supersede NAFTA and the one we have with Mexico?
This is a very good question, because there's some of the same exact countries would be in both. And that is a question to which the advisory group I'm a member of have been unable to get an answer. But one of the answers we got was an answer we didn't really like, because one of the things that the U.S. Trade Representatives has been saying is that, well, we're going to have all these protections with that investor-state dispute mechanism.